Hi there, welcome to this portion of the On-Demand RV Dealers Convention Expo. I'm joined today by Tom Kline of Better Vantage Point. It's an endorsed provider, and what we're going to talk today about are alleviating some dealer GM headaches, and Tom is very good at doing that. You know, first of all, Tom, I want to ask you about some recent privacy issues that there's been some enforcement actions on. You know, what are you seeing in that area, and what do dealers really need to be concerned about?
Yeah, great question, Phil, and good morning to you and everyone who's watching. Enforcement is on the uptick. Every month, virtually, I see 3, 4, or 5 new enforcement actions. In fact, this morning, before we were getting on here, I'm reading an indictment of a dealer in Oklahoma who is sentenced to 130 years, 130 months in prison for deceptive practices, wire fraud, uttering checks and other people's names. I'm seeing more enforcement on the advertising side. So anything that's potentially deceptive, the FTC and the attorneys general are really concentrating on that. And the reason they're concentrating on that is because anytime you have a consumer problem, when consumers complain, and the first thing you're going to complain about is potential bait and switch or advertising problems, or something that you may be a little edgy, but it could go either way. Well, if it doesn't go the way of the consumer and they get upset, then they're going to go to a regulator. I know of anecdotally, for example, an RV dealer who the customer wasn't able to get financed. It was a secondary customer on an RV. They came back in and they saw a copy of their driver's license on the salesman's desk. Of course, that's against the privacy rules, the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, the new regulations. And so she allegedly complained to the FTC, and the FTC came in and investigated this RV dealer. That hasn't been published yet, but that's what I understand. So the myriad of rules and regulations, there are a lot of them. But if you think it's probably not right, it's probably not right. I mean, the kind of the common sense, the prudent man rule should apply here.
Right, and a lot of times it's not the dealer management themselves, it's the employees that are doing the activities because they're not properly trained, and that's where you can help out a lot. You know, another thing that's come up over the last few months as with aged inventory, and that's the issue of curtailments and lenders going after dealers for those curtailment payments. Obviously, you know, dealers can plan for that, but you know, what can you do there what advice would you have for dealers dealing with lenders and that curtailment issue?
Yeah, so the first thing is, don't bury your head in the sand. Go directly at the problem. Communicate with your lender. Sit down with them. Come up with a plan. Take a look at your cash flow. Take a look at your lines of credit. Take a look at everything. Come up with a plan and go sit down and show them how and why and what you can do. You know, these lenders, Phil, as you well know, they don't want to repossess your inventory. They don't want to have you be in default of your agreements. They're nervous, just like you're nervous if you're a dealer, right? They don't want that to happen. It's not good for them. It's not good for the dealer. And so open, honest, direct, straightforward communication, I think, is the best remedy for these curtailment issues. It is a problem, and dealers should have an action plan when they sit down. But they should be very communicative and say, look, I need 2 weeks to come up with a plan, and then I'm going to come sit down and meet you, or you come see me, or however you want to do it, and sit down and just try to work it out. That by far is the best way to go.
Yeah, absolutely. In my conversations with some of the floor plan lenders, they are looking for that communication, but for them, the best surprise is no surprise, and they need that communication in advance, and many times willing to work with the dealer on that. You know,
It's-
another
it's
thing
great.
that you help
It's
dealers
great.
out with quite a bit is reviewing their insurance coverages. You know, insurance is kind of an ever-changing, moving target, especially with a complicated business at the dealerships. When you're reviewing coverages for dealers, where are you seeing gaps and where they need to pay attention to mitigating their risk?
Yeah, it's a great question, Phil. And the first thing I would do is encourage the dealers to find out what they have and what's covered. A lot of dealers don't understand their insurance policies, and I'm going to in fact say most dealers don't understand it. And there's no shame in not understanding. The first thing to do is to try to use a guy like me or use your insurance professional. Have them sit down with you, have them explain what's covered and what's not. And here's a great example of why that's important. So I was at a dealership last week, and the general manager walked in and said, "Hey, we have a problem. This problem, you remember with the title, we can't get title to the vehicle, and we already sold it to someone else. And it was a cash transaction, so they want us to provide the title, and we can't provide it. What do we do?" And the dealer looked stumped. I said, "Can I take a crack at this one?" I said, "Hand me your insurance policy." So I opened up the insurance policy and I showed him a section under their what's called title errors and omissions coverage. And I said, "This is one, if the woman won't give you the title, you turn this over to your insurance company. And here's what the language says in the policy. And you just let them mess with it. You tell your customer that you're going to contact your insurance company, that the title, you never got the title to the proper titles of the vehicle and why, and let the insurance company pay for that $25,000 problem that you cannot resolve." And so in 5 minutes, I'd solved a $25,000 problem just by understanding what's in the insurance policy. So it's a kind of a long answer to your good question, but first thing is to know what's in there. And then, do you have cyber insurance? It's a huge deal. There's a dealership in the western part of Virginia that they have a class action going on because of a data breach from earlier this year. More than 50,000 people had their information breached, and now there's a class action lawsuit. There's another dealership up in Northern Virginia that had a class action lawsuit, and they just are finishing the settlements of that. And those were as a result of data breaches. So, do you have cyber insurance? Do you have pollution insurance? Pollution is one of the few areas where the dealer can be held personally liable. If somebody takes your used batteries or your used tires, for those that have those that have service centers, throws them in the river, that it's the dealer that's responsible. So the best thing to do is make sure your vendors have pollution insurance. So you should be checking whether they have pollution insurance, and then the dealership should also have pollution insurance. Some of these things are not expensive relative to the size of the operations, and I'm going to say to make sure that the enterprise is well covered, or as I like to say, to make sure running a dealership is like trying to tuck an octopus into bed and the tentacles keep flopping all over the place. So to make sure that the tentacles get tucked in, make sure you have plenty of umbrella insurance. And the reason umbrella insurance is important is if there's a catastrophic problem, like your porter hits somebody on the way to the gas station and they have some difficulties, you're putting your whole enterprise on the line if you don't have enough umbrella insurance. So your umbrella insurance should be reflective of how much your enterprise is worth. Otherwise, you're underinsured for potential liability problems. So this is a topic I could talk about, as you know, for days on end, but that's kind of the short version of what I think dealers should be taking a look at.
Well, and Tom, I think that's, one of the big reasons RVDA endorsed Better Vantage Point for some of this work as a consultant is because this stuff is constantly changing. It's very complicated, and it isn't something that the dealers or their GMs are dealing with on a daily basis a lot of the times, So, one of the things I like to think about you as kind of a troubleshooter for the dealer and their GMs if necessary. You know, typically when a dealer comes to you, how do you work with them, and how do you help them, you know, get through some of this stuff and alleviate the headaches, if you will?
Sure. Well, sometimes, everyone should feel free to call me. I'm not gonna run the meter the minute I pick up the phone. So first we have to diagnose what the problem is, and determine what the action plan is. Sometimes I can solve the problem in 5 minutes. I had a client call and say, without going into the whole thing, we have a $250,000 problem and we don't know what to do, and what should I do? And I said, do you have insurance? They said yes. Said go to this page, open up the page, and 5 minutes later she had a solution to a $250,000 problem. So sometimes it's as simple as that, but sometimes it gets more complicated, as I'm sure you imagine. So the most important thing is just pick up the phone and call me. We'll kind of triage the problem, see what there is to do about it, and then I'll give you an action plan and kind of how much of my time I think it would take. Sometimes it requires a visit. Sometimes it can all be done by telephone and Zoom. It really depends on the complexity of the problem and what it is that they're looking for.
Well, great. Thanks, Tom. And one of the things I'm always trying to push this out to the dealer members, because you don't really need something until you need it, right? So in every issue of RV Executive today, Tom is listed. He typically has an article in the magazine. And then of course, Tom is listed among our endorsed providers on the RVDA website at rvda.org. Tom, thanks a lot. It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
And thanks for your service to the dealers, and we will talk to you soon.
Thanks, Phil.